the CFO in this size of a company at the earliest stages probably wouldn't have a full-time job. If you're doing the ongoing accounting, you can't turn around and do the audit. Sometimes there's just a small need in some particular area, say technical accounting, we can assist with that. By the time he and I left and the third partner had already left, we were about 150 people and ready to go do something else. Mistakes with time tend to be one category that can be a real stumbling block for some founders that I see.
Welcome to the WRP Show. My name is Aaron Rubin. Today I'm joined by Claire Martell. Hi, Claire. How's it going?
Going well, thank you.
Great. So, you and I, we're kindred spirits because we're both accountants. So, we both spent time in the big, when you were, it was probably the big, at least the big five, if not the big eight.
It was, yeah.
And I was with the big four. And so we have, this accounting connection. So I'm really excited to talk to another accountant because, we have problems. But what I really want to know, because, you've been in Silicon Valley for a bit and have helped a bunch of companies kind of get from here to there, wherever it's trying to go. I'd really love to hear about one, the kind of companies you work with and how exactly you help them.
Sure. So the kinds of companies we deal with typically are technology companies, life science companies, oftentimes companies that are formed and at the very beginning they already have an exit plan and they need to be prepared for a possible acquirer pretty early on in their life cycle. So we work with these companies to keep themselves organized, to be ready for audits, to be compliant with their tax filings, other kinds of things that back office pressures oftentimes will put on early stage companies. So we work with them in those capacities, doing the accounting, finance, and HR functions, and also on projects that maybe companies that are a little further along need in due diligence readiness, audit preparedness, technical accounting, financial modeling, things like that.
That's so much to do. So do you work with companies if funded by angels or do you like pre-seed? I mean, how early is early for a lot of these companies?
Well, oftentimes these days, angel rounds and seed rounds are pretty large. And so they need to be dealing with their fiduciary duty from very early days with other people's money. So we do get involved very early on. Sometimes because we work with a lot of serial entrepreneurs, we've worked with them before. They know the benefits of starting early. And so we are working with companies very shortly after formation.
So for those new, let's say the new entrepreneurs, they were working maybe at an Apple or a Google for a while, and now they've decided they want to do their own thing. And as you said, they think with the end in mind, which we're told we should be doing. And I'm sure that they tend to be focused on product and of course sales, which is super important. Do they think about accounting early on? And obviously we think they should, but I mean, is that something that concerns them?
It becomes concerning, I think, when it's time for investor reporting and financial forecasting. How long is this cash going to last? How much do we need to raise in the next round? What is our hiring plan going to pencil out to financially? So those questions come up pretty early, and sometimes they're doing some of this modeling themselves. Usually they are to go get the financing, but there's a finer level of planning that then happens with an annual budget or forecast when it comes to actually doing the cash burn analysis, the monthly and quarterly reporting, board reporting. All of those kinds of activities usually require a great deal more than what they have time for or want to spend their time doing, even if they're qualified to be doing it. So we work with them pretty early on in those kinds of areas. They don't always see that that's needed. So sometimes there's a cleanup exercise. Oftentimes we are called in and it's, maybe tax filings are due. They can't put together a set of books and a tax accountant would refer us in to clean up the accounting and carry it forward. So that cleanup exercise is actually a common project that we take on.
Okay. And I imagine a lot of these early stage companies, do they have CFOs at that point or?
No. The consulting CFO or fractional CFO world is pretty common in our industry, and it is a role we fill along with other roles in accounting and finance. The CFO in this size of a company at the earliest stages probably wouldn't have a full-time job. That's why oftentimes founders are trying to do that job, but they're also pulled in many directions. So it's difficult for them to give sufficient mind share to oftentimes the readiness efforts for board meetings and things like that they're also responsible for.
Got it. And so you come in and just fill a lot of roles, for the company.
Right.
And so do large accounting firms play in that space too? Or is it really, the people who are, like you know what they're doing, you've gotten the t-shirt, the whole 9 yards. Is this sort of this niche little area that you just do a really good job in?
It is a niche area, and I do believe we do a good job in this area. As far as the large accounting firms, they don't tend to have departments of people like us. Their primary area is the audits, the taxes. If you're doing the ongoing accounting, you can't turn around and do the audit. The auditors, they like that work. The big firms want to get the audit work when it's time. The earliest days of these companies, they don't need an audit just yet. Once they start raising more money and the investors insist on having audits, then they're prepared if they've been working with us to go through that audit.
Got it. And so you come in super early, you fill in all these roles, and then how do you know when it's time for you to go? Like when they get the CFO or how does that transition piece work?
The kind of stick that we put in the ground is when a specific function is taking half time or more, they're getting to the point where they're paying for the full-time function. So they need to, and usually they're on a growth mode. So that's when we start recommending it's time to put in place maybe your first person. And we can augment around whatever that level of individual may be. If there's lots of transaction processing, say e-commerce activity and a lot of detailed tracking, high volume type businesses, maybe low transaction value, but still high volume. Sometimes those kinds of businesses could need people at the junior end first, just to handle a lot of the transactional level, system reconciliations and things like that may be still present in early stage companies. Other companies may need a more senior level first. Let's say they're expanding globally. They have a new system, ERP system they want to roll out. There's a lot of subsidiaries being created overseas. Some of those more complex things can drive a more senior person first before the junior person. And again, we can just work around whoever that first hire is and continue to augment if they're not ready to build out a full-time department.
Okay, so do you find usually like after and this is generally speaking, like after the A round, after the B round, that's when they have the fuller departments, or do you keep on, right on through into their D round? Maybe they need some additional support. They're not ready for a couple full-time.
We do continue on, depending on sometimes the size of those rounds, what they're doing with the money, and we could continue on indefinitely augmenting a department as well. Sometimes there's just a small need in some particular area, say technical accounting, we can assist with that. Or if they have great accounting department, but they need a little bit of financial modeling, we can assist with that. With larger, more established companies, we do quite a bit of project work. So we might go away for a while after they've built out a department, but then get called back to help them get through an acquisition. Maybe they want to split a piece of the company off to help, so we can help essentially do a set of financial statements for the spinoff. All of those kinds of projects are very custom and unique to any given company, but that's probably a third of our business is around project work like that.
You're essentially just a giant Swiss Army knife of accounting, right? I mean, that's really what you are, and I think it's fascinating and obviously very helpful, I'm sure, for all your clients who have these really varying needs that maybe they're not sure how to handle. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, we started with accounting, and just listen to the client requirements. That's what brought us to add on financial modeling, technical accounting, HR assistance, recruiting. We will help them recruit for these full-time people as they're building out the department. It is very much a client-centric kind of mindset and just, being to a certain extent opportunistic. These are the things that we're seeing our clients need. Can we help them? We've hired to the client needs and it's grown from there.
Okay, so I think you do incredible work, and you do incredible work. So every superhero has an origin story. I would love to kind of hear one, how you got into accounting, kind of how, and just from I have my own big accounting experience. I'd love to hear yours, and then how you got to do what you did or what you're doing currently.
Originally, I started at PwC and spent several years there, and then left there. And the options coming out of Big Four at the time, Big Eight, are oftentimes SEC reporting kinds of positions. And those were there, but they didn't really excite me. And there was a little consulting firm. The founder had left EY. He saw a need at his clients, and his name was Leslie Murdoch. I joined his firm. There were about a dozen people. And at the time, these are kind of the go-go 90s, and there were a lot of IPOs, and we helped with a lot of SEC reporting and IPO assistance and secondary offerings, bond offerings at larger companies. And so those early days, I was doing a lot of compliance and SEC reporting type work, but in a lot of different types of situations. And it was very interesting, but I really kind of started gravitating to earlier and earlier companies and enjoyed working with founders getting to the IPO stage and that readiness effort. And there's just a lot of excitement and cultural curiosity that I have around those kinds of companies. So back in 2000, and there were about 120 of us at the time. And of course, the year 2000 was right before the .bomb. And we endured that. Then, came out of that with Sarbanes-Oxley being the next challenge. So we had a lot of former auditors on staff and created a SOX practice and grew that. What we had shrunk a little bit and had to regrow the practice. And by the time he and I left and the third partner had already left, we were about 150 people and ready to go do something else. That was a good experience. Went off and did some other things, had a retail wine and gifts business, and
cool.
Became a sommelier for just general qualifications to work in that business. But a lot of fun, but the phone was still ringing and emails still coming in. So he and I decided to just pair back up and make a boutique firm like we enjoyed earlier on. And so that's what we have today. He retired about 9 or 10 years ago, and I bought him out.
So it sounds like a lot of the experience you've had throughout your career has sort of built up to this point, and learning and evolving with the tech industry overall has been sort of part of your whole game.
Yeah, it's just been fascinating watching the cycles within both tech and life sciences. We're in the middle of the big AI mega trend now, and we've seen other mega trends over the years. And so I'm enjoying it, and it's always something new. And we have, a team now of about 40 people just out there serving different companies in these fields.
Yeah. So because obviously for the up until recently, prior to 10 years of that, right, it was SaaS all the time, right? That was the big model.
Yes.
And now we're transitioning to this next one. Are you seeing perhaps some similarities between the two? Or again, you've seen if you have a website, all of a sudden that was a big thing and then that went away. I'm curious to kind of see how you see the AI trend in business going, if you have any insights to it.
Yeah, as far as where I see AI headed, is that what you're
yeah, and maybe how is it different than the SaaS revolution? Are there similarities?
Yeah, I think there's a similarity with any of these big, I'll call them mega trends. There's mobility was another one, right? Apps, development of, your cell phone as your, ultimate device, at least where we are today. And, before that, years back was even the development of a disk drive, right? So what that did to personal computing. And so I think this mega trend that we're in now with AI, I see some similarities in that there's, 100% of the news is all about that thing. So if you're not in that one thing, sometimes you're at a real disadvantage if you're trying to raise money, still not at the point where you have traction to have an exit. Those companies are really challenged still. I mean, it's a great environment if you're an AI company right now. It's not a great environment if you're in some of the other very valid sectors of tech. And I think there are certain things that kind of ebb and flow alongside it. Like we happen to be having a lot of success with defense tech companies or other kinds of companies that maybe are in a specific vertical. We see, maybe some additional successes that are in pockets. But the SaaS revolution, I think, was, and everything going to the cloud from, enterprise software, licenses and whatnot, that changed. I think it took longer for that to develop. So I'd say there's maybe a little bit of a cycle difference in that respect. It was revolutionary just the same as AI. It just took a longer time. I think now the pressure of AI adoption across verticals, regardless of positions, kind of throughout an organization is at a much faster pace of demand from the top down is, I think, part of what's driving it. I think it's going to be a challenge for, the payback equation to really prove out quickly because a lot of money is being spent in that area.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I could talk to you about that one sentence. I could talk to you for another half an hour for because I find it fascinating. When you look at whether it's AI or anything else, what mistakes do you see founders making that you're in the accounting space, or maybe not accounting, but that which you can help with? What are those big mistakes you see?
Being a founder is incredibly challenging, right? They're pulled in a million different directions, and I think mistakes with time tend to be one category that can be a real stumbling block for some founders that I see, whether they're spreading themselves too thin and the things that are mattering the most aren't getting sufficient attention, or whether they're choosing to, micromanage things that they could easily delegate. Those mistakes with time tend to compound and can really set them back. I think the other broad category I'd just say is money, mistakes with money. Sometimes it's overspending. Other times it's underspending. It's a difficult balance to reach. And I think the overspending tends to be, kind of a rookie problem sometimes that I see. More seasoned entrepreneurs, I don't see making that mistake. I do sometimes see them underinvesting still, but the real seasoned entrepreneurs that we work with seem to have a good recognition around where should I best spend my time and my money? What should I be working on and what should I be delegating? I think getting that right is a delicate balance, and I think those are probably the two biggest areas that I think are challenges for almost all founders.
And so, and I love a good war story. Do you have any stories that clients that you've worked with, they took your advice and it worked out great, or maybe they decided not to, and you're like, oh, I really wish you would have done that, and then maybe you had to clean up later, or maybe the result wasn't great. Do you have any? Yeah, I love your good accounting war story. Let's just personal things.
Yeah, over the years there probably a lot, but I think where going back to the time and money challenges that founders face, I think there's sometimes maybe one that didn't work out great was we were trying to encourage a young founder to put some guardrails around spending and to get substantiated support for the spending that was happening and whatnot. And I think speed and expeditiousness can really trip up some of those controls. If you just say it's not worth my time and it's not worth the effort of my team, things did get out of hand. We ultimately discovered, some problems with the spending on certain employees' parts, and they knew that it was going to go undetected because nobody was ultimately controlling at the time credit card spend. And, asking for support and saying that it's important only goes so far if it's not agreed upon at the, CEO level. So that proved a little bit disappointing for them in the end, and they had to own that. And that was unfortunate. I think on the successes, there's a good success, challenging situation. A client was gearing up for an IPO, and they really were under-resourced. They had a VP of finance and a staff level person, and they knew they needed a lot of help. So they hired us to help them get ready for their multi-year audit and ultimately the IPO. The real challenge came as soon as we were brought in to do the work. The VP finance left. And so they really had no rudder in the water, so to speak. And so we needed to fill essentially the CFO seat on down and do what turned out to be a great deal of cleanup work. But they saw it through, and they did go public, and subsequently were able to get their own CFO in place. And, they're still a client today. We still do work for them today. So, yeah.
So they went public without a CFO?
They did, yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow,
You
must have been some really great work. To get that, that's incredible.
It was a big challenge for sure. And it was, not something I'd recommend at all, but, it was what they were faced with at the time. And it helped that they were small cap, but, even so, they were needing to do all of the compliance work.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, thank you very much for joining me. This, again, fascinating. I could keep talking to you forever, especially about the A stuff. Well, we're going to have you come back in and talk about AI, because it's a really interesting area. But again, I appreciate all your time here. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
All right. That closes out for this episode of WRP. I've forgotten the name of our first WRP show. It's a very complicated thing. I can't keep it straight. The WRP show. Thank you.
Advisory services offered through Werber Rubin Papier Wealth Management, LLC, ASEC Registered Investment Advisor. Registration does not imply any particular level of skill. The information discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice or a recommendation to buy or sell any securities. All opinions are the speaker's own and may change. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and all investments involve risk. Listeners should consult their own financial, legal, and tax professionals before making decisions. For more information about our services, please see our Form ADV at advisorinfo.sec.gov.